Welcome to Beerstories from Beerstory Brewhouse. In this video I have 7 tips for you how to avoid off flavors in your beer. If you don't want to miss any videos from Beerstories, please click like and subscribe down in the corner. You'll make me very happy, you'll help out the channel, and you get your newest videos directly in your YouTube feed. Also find me on Facebook and Instagram. So I have 7 tips for you on how to prevent off flavors in your beer, because there's nothing worse than brewing a good beer and then finding out that it has a lot of off flavors. So I thought I would run through some of the things I always have in mind to brew the best beer and to avoid off flavors, of course. In the end, I have another little tip for you on how to dial in your beer. But first of all, 7 tips for preventing off flavors. Number 1, cleaning and sanitizing. It's just key. It's the most important thing. An infection in your beer will ruin your beer no matter what. So cleaning is super important. But disinfecting is also super important, and those two things are not the same. Cleaning, it gets rid of all the dirt. It's an basic product, and disinfecting is some kind of acid, and that will kill off all the microorganisms. And it won't clean. And the cleaning won't kill microorganisms, so you need to do both. And don't mix basic and acid, because that can create a poisonous gas. So don't do that. Number 2 is pitch enough yeast. I use Brewfather a lot, and that program tells me how much yeast to add. 1 package of dry yeast is rarely enough for 5-gallon beer or 25-liter beer. Usually I pitch about 2, 3 and up to 5 packages of yeast for 25-liter beer or 5-gallon beer. You can use a little less if you rehydrate, or even less if you make a yeast starter. But it's really important that there is enough yeast. If your fermentation takes 5 days, the yeast will be really stressed after 5 days if there aren't enough yeast in there. And then for the diacetyl rest, where it cleans up afterwards, there won't be enough healthy yeast to clean up. So you'll be left with a beer that's fermented, there's alcohol in it, but there's a lot of off flavors because the yeast is not strong enough to clean up after itself. So pitch enough yeast. It's really important. Number 3, rehydrate or make a yeast starter if you have a beer that's higher than 1065 OG. And this is some information I got from some of the yeast producers. The yeast, if you pitch the yeast directly into a higher OG wort, it will get super stressed right away, and this osmosis stress will make the yeast will make a lot of off flavors right away, because when at the exact time it attacks the sugar, it starts dividing, and if there aren't enough yeast, it will create a lot of off flavors. Actually it still creates off flavors, but the diacetyl rest, which is another tip, will take care of that again. But you have to make a yeast starter or rehydrate your yeast if it's higher than 1065 OG. So the next one, number 4, pitch at the right temperature. It's really important. Otherwise you will just make the yeast create a lot of off flavors right away again. So just pitch at the right temp. You can actually see a video with all this information about fermentation down in the description. I also have a video on how to make a temperature controlled fermentation chamber. It's not that hard to do, and it really pays off because you can make great beer, but if you haven't got control over the temperature, it's going to suck. There are going to be off flavors in it, and if you can control that, you're gonna make great beer. So it's for me, I always do it. I always control my temperature, so I know exactly what I'm putting the yeast through. Actually, one time down here in my basement, it was wintertime. I had the window open. It was 15 degrees Celsius in this room, but in the fermentation tank, the yeast heated up the wort or the beer up to 26 degrees Celsius. So that's 11 degrees difference between outside and inside of the fermentation tank. So it's really important to control this temperature because the yeast can heat it up a lot. If you haven't got any control, you should use a kveik yeast or something that can take these higher temperatures. Okay, so the next one is the diacetyl rest. That's number 6. Diacetyl rest is really important. This is where the yeast actually cleans up after itself. So if you have 5 days of fermentation, you will have 5 to 7 days, maybe longer, where the yeast will just clean up after itself, and mainly eating up diacetyl again. That's why we call this period the diacetyl rest. If you increase the temperature just a little bit, just 5 degrees Celsius, it will actually speed up this process. So it will be 1-to-1 with the fermentation time. So if you have a beer that's fermenting in 5 days, you ramp up the temperature, and then you have a diacetyl rest for 5 days. But you don't have to hurry. There's no problem in leaving the beer in for 14 days, for 3 weeks, for a month. It will still be a perfect beer. So don't hurry up to bottle your beer or keg your beer. Leave it alone at least for 2 weeks, just to make sure that it has cleaned up all the off flavors and the diacetyl. So be patient. Number 7, avoid any oxygen. Do not open your lid for your fermentation tank. If you are going to a dry hop, use a magnet so you don't have to open the lid. I use a magnet like this, even in my steel fermenter, for coffee beans, for wood chips, for dry hops, etc. Just to make sure I don't let any oxygen in. Oxygen will really ruin your beer, especially hoppy beers. You will lose the hop flavor. They can get sweet if it's really oxidized. They will get sweet and turn kind of brown purple. If it's a beer with a lot of crystal malts, it will get this cardboard metallic flavor, and I promise you it will ruin your beer. Even though you don't think it will ruin anything, it will do it just a little bit, and you can really make some really great beer if you don't let any oxygen in. Your beer will be much better. When I keg, I do a close transfer. You can see in the description how to do that, pretty easy. The only time I let my beer near oxygen is when I bottle them. But then I bottle carbonate them with sugar, and the yeast inside will eat up some of the oxygen that's present there. But it's not ideal, but that works, I think. So that was 7 tips for you. And then I also promised you another little tip for controlling your ester profile, the fruity flavors in your beer, especially with ale strings. If you start them off at the lowest temperature of the range, they will create less ester flavors. If you pitch them at the high end of the temperature range, they will create a lot of esters. So you can actually control your ester profile with this within the temperature range. So that's just another little tip for you. But that was 7 tips for avoiding off flavors in your beer. If you stick around to the end, there will be 2 videos up here that YouTube thinks you should watch. And I would also really appreciate if you click like and subscribe down the corner here. You get the newest videos in the YouTube feed. Yeah, and you help out the channel as well. And remember, you can also find me on Facebook and Instagram. And if you have any questions, write to me in the comments, write to me through Instagram, Facebook, or whatever, or through my website, beerstories.dk. You can find me there as well. So yeah, that was 7 tips for you. So have a happy brewing out there.